Hi friends, as a professor of physiology and as an examiner at the university level, I've always seen that the graphs always bear a higher intellectual rating. Whenever a student draws a graph, it always fetches extra marks. But graphs are difficult to understand and therefore difficult to draw in the exams also. Means retaining that entire graph and drawing it sometimes has become difficult, and therefore we started a new section, that is graphs, discussion on the graphs. Today's graph is one such graph which appears very complicated, but in reality it's very easy. So let's understand this graph. Pressure flow relationship, and this is about the flow through a narrow tube. The graph appears something like this, and it might scare you because it is appearing complicated, but in reality it's a very simple graph. So let's understand what this graph is all about. It's about the pressure flow relationship, all right, that we have already mentioned now. There was an MCQ related to this graph. This graph was given, and the question is, there are 4 curves shown in the graph. Which of them represents cerebral blood flow or cerebral circulation? A, B, C, D. Can you take a guess? All right, the answer is D. I know it was a little unfair because you could barely see the graph and then I asked the question. Anyways, D represents cerebral blood flow or cerebral circulation. Why is that? Let's understand the graph now. First of all, it is the pressure flow relationship through a narrow tube. So it could be a blood vessel, it could be an atherosclerosed blood vessel, it could be a simple narrow tube outside the body which is following the principles of physics. All right. So on the horizontal axis we have pressure, and on the vertical axis we have flow. And therefore, I have always suggested this, always look at the horizontal axis first, understand the units, and by change of those units, what is happening on the vertical axis, try to gauge that in the graph. All right, let's start with the curves. A is any narrow rigid tube. You can see here that as the pressure is increased, in the case of A, the flow is also increasing in a linear fashion. You can see here, increase the pressure, the flow will go on increasing in a linear fashion. If you increase the delta P, P1 minus P2, difference between 2 points in the circulation or any 2 points in the tube, so flow will occur from high to low pressure, or generally speaking, if you increase the pressure, the flow increases in a linear fashion. This is any narrow rigid tube. Okay, this is true for any straight vessel or any straight narrow rigid tube. Compare this with B. Oh, by the way, hint is given in these graphs. A is mentioned, so always we will look at A first and then compare the others with in the context of A. So this is a hint. So let's compare. Look at the curve B. What is happening with B? As you increase the pressure on the horizontal axis, you can see that the flow is increasing almost in a linear fashion to a certain extent, and then the flow has steeply increased beyond a certain point. The flow has further increased very steeply, and by steeply I mean for a small increase in pressure there is a great rise in the flow. That is how you can explain B. Now this represents a distensible vessel. So B represents flow in a distensible blood vessel in the body. There are many such blood vessels which are distensible, and they show this kind of a property. What does it mean? Look, as the pressure is increased, the flow will increase. That's the derived from the Poiseuille-Hazen formula, or the principle which tells us about the flow through the tubes and a relationship with the other factors as well. So increased flow, with increased pressure, but then as the blood flow increases, the blood vessel distends, and as it distends, the flow increases even further. With just a small increase in pressure, then the flow will increase tremendously. Rise in blood flow will be very steep, as shown in the case of B. On the vertical axis, increase is very sharp. So this could be any vessel, any distensible vessel in the body will show this property. What about, let's say B can be aorta, for example, a distensible vessel with smooth muscle in its wall. What about C? What is C telling us? The curve in the white. The C curve is telling us about myogenic stretch mechanism. All right, what is the myogenic stretch mechanism? Myo means muscle. So blood vessels are lined with smooth muscle, that is myo, and stretch is the stretch of the vessel wall. So what you can see here in the case of C is that initially as the pressure was increased, the flow has increased, but beyond a certain point, the flow has actually declined. It stabilized, but it declined. It has not gone up like the our normal rigid tube. The flow has declined in comparison with A. So what happens here is the myogenic stretch theory, that as the flow increases initially, there is stretch of the vessel wall. Stretch of the vessel wall means these smooth muscle cells in the wall of the blood vessel, they have calcium channels in their wall. So those calcium channels open and the smooth muscle cells contract. So smooth muscle responding to the stretch, and they contracting means the vessel will narrow, and as the vessel narrows, the blood flow will decline. Even if you increase the pressure, the flow is not increasing beyond a certain point. All right, it is just about increasing. It's not increasing much as compared to A. All right, it's not a linear relationship because of the contraction of the smooth muscle. So that's myogenic stretch theory. Okay, and now coming to the curve D, which was the answer to the MCQ. D represents cerebral blood vessel or cerebral circulation. D is telling us that as the pressure is increased on the horizontal axis, look at the green curve. Initially the flow has increased, all right, on the vertical axis the graph is going up, but then at this point, at a certain point, what has happened now is there is no more increase in the flow. The flow has stabilized, straightened up the line. Means what? Now you increase the pressure on the horizontal axis, the flow has remained constant. The flow does not increase any further. So this is typical of the phenomenon called as autoregulation of blood flow. How is autoregulation defined? Over a wide range of pressures, the blood flow remains constant. That's the concept of the autoregulation of the blood flow. So that is what has happened here. Pressure is increasing, but flow not going up. Flow is constant at this level. So pressure 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, the flow is same, not going up. All right, let's discuss it in quick time, the concept of autoregulation. Look, there are vital organs in the body, the brain, heart, kidney. These are the vital organs and they can't afford to have fluctuations in their blood flow. Consider the other organs where there is no autoregulation. What happens is, suppose skeletal muscle is exercising, it needs extra blood flow. So some other organ blood flow will have to be diverted to skeletal muscle. And who is doing this diversion? Some external agency like ANS, ANS is diverting the blood flow from one organ to the other organ. External means outside those organs. Now, in the case of these vital organs, they regulate their own blood flow. External agency is not regulating their blood flow by and large. So that's called as autoregulation, self-regulation of their own blood flow. Since they are vital organs, they cannot afford to have changes in their blood flow because some other organ is requiring extra blood, or because body's blood pressure is fluctuating, it is dipping. These organs cannot afford to have that, and therefore they hold their blood flow constant. And therefore remember, from 60 mm of Hg up to 180 mm of Hg, that's the mean blood pressure range in which these organs can maintain their blood flow to a constant level. That's the concept of autoregulation of blood flow, and that was the graph for this particular video.